Hi and welcome to Top Volts, and today we're going to be looking at the Williams Honda and a sort of a rough run through the history of the Williams Honda in Scalextric. In front of me here I've got the first gen Williams Honda, which was first released in 1988. So this is the number 5, which is the C374. And we'll run through the differences in these cars as we're going through. And then the second was released in 1988, which is the number 6, which is the C369. And then we go back to the original number again, which is the C374, which is also released in 1988. The reason there's a difference between the two is because this is a first generation, no magnets. And then the magnets were introduced, as you can see here. And this ran through from 1988 around to 1993, where they eventually changed the mould, or the tooling, I should say. And in 2022, I believe, they released the new Williams Honda, which is a beautiful model. It's a beautiful model, but it is a very different tooling to the originals. So we'll start at the very beginning and then we'll work our way through. I'll then take these cars apart so you can see the differences inside, because there actually is quite a bit of differences between these cars, especially obviously the modern is completely different internally. But these three are visually very, very similar. Internally, they do change. So we'll start with the first generation Williams Honda. So the first Williams Honda, so the Gen 1 you could call it. So this is the number 5, the C374. And you can see visually from the other cars, there's not a lot different until you turn it over. And then once you look on the underside, you notice there's no magnet, and it's very open around the rear gear. So you can actually see the pinion and the rear gear very close, very easily, sorry. And the underside of the chassis is ever so different as well. And what you've got is, you've got no rear flash. So no flashing light when you release the throttle on the controller, where the other two have a rear flash, which was introduced into the sets that you could buy. There was 2 different sets you could get. I believe one was the World Champion set, and I can't remember what the first one was called, which they released in 1988. All I know is that it was a set C888. I can probably find out what that set was called. But the second set they released in 1989 was the World Champion set, which I think then ran through to 1993. So then that moves us on to 1988, where they introduced the magnet and the rear flash. So this rear magnet's adjustable, so you can make sure it misses that rear gear. But this time they've closed this off, so you can't see the pinion that clearly. I'm assuming they've done that because of all the extra electrics that are going back to this rear light. Because unbelievably, inside of this chassis, there's quite a lot going on inside here, which we can have a look at in a little bit. That then moves us on to, still released in the same period, and with subtle changes once again within the chassis and on the underside. This is when they've gone from having just Scalextric printed on the base to Hornby Hobbies, and all of this other information like the 12 volts, and it's got a magnet, and also the magnet becomes non-adjustable. It's actually like a fixed item onto the chassis of the car. And there's also subtle differences within the bottom of the chassis as well, and the pickups are different. So I'll turn all these over. So I've turned these 3 cars over, so you can see the differences on the undersides. So you can see no magnet on the first gen, and a very open area at the back to allow access into the pinion and the rear gear. And then we move along and you've added a magnet which is adjustable, and then a fixed magnet. But also on the underside of this chassis, there's an extra area that houses the magnet. So if you had to change this out, there is an area underneath here. If I lift this up so you can see closely, there's an area which locates the magnet. So if you had to change that out, there is an area that it does fix into to help you. The pickups pretty much stayed the same, with the wires connecting and pushing down straight into the pickup on both of these models. And then they changed it to the more modern double pin, which then the pickup rides on, which we've seen before in other models. This also makes it a bit easier getting into these cars, because as I mentioned, there's a lot going on inside of these chassis, which was pretty impressive once you open up and you see what they've managed to cram in there, which we will look at. So now we'll take a look at the more modern 2022 release model. You can see how technology's moved along. You know, the tooling is a lot more accurate, and I would assume that no doubt they've scaled this more accurately as well, and they've added various features to the model. Some fairly delicate features, as you can see just on the end here. I believe that's like an aerial of some description, and then you've got the air intakes either side, which these models don't have. Unfortunately, they've not included the rear flash, which is a real shame, because it would have been nice to hold on to that feature, especially as, you know, with these old models, you know, they introduced it on these two and then you lose it on this one, so it's a little bit of a shame, but it doesn't take away from, you know, the beauty of this car. It's absolutely incredible. It comes apart very differently to these models. There's actually a feature on these three which I really like, which we can have a look at as well, which they've done away with this new model. Although this comes apart completely different, so it's very hard to compare the four with the modern car, because when you separate the chassis, it pretty much comes away in two. And these, I believe, are like rare earth magnets, are incredibly powerful. So you could probably upgrade these, you know, to one of these magnets and improve the performance. But I like to stay to the original as much as I can, really. But as a model to add to your collection and complete the full set, obviously there's a lot more to buy, because you can get various numbers of each and colours and whatnot. But these are the four I wanted to collect to complete my set, really, of the Williams Honda. So what we'll do now, we'll open them up, have a little look inside, have a look at a little feature that I quite like about these three. So I think what we'll do, we'll open up the Hornby's Hobby and have a little look inside of this one. So this is the one with the fixed magnet and the turbo flash, as they call it, on the back. But with these cars, by undoing the front screw first, so we take the screw out, and what they've done, which I think is quite neat, because of how much is going on inside of the car, you won't want to necessarily open up the whole car every time just to check to make sure if the motor's connections are good. What they've done is, by taking that front screw off, you can actually just take the cockpit away, put that to one side, and this exposes the connections on the motor. So I think that's quite a neat feature, really, and also the connections up here for the pickups. So if there's an initial problem and this isn't working and the guides look fine, you can literally take the cockpit off and inspect the connections on the motors and on the pickups, which I think is a really neat feature, one that all three of these have. So it's something they introduced in 1987 and then continued it all the way through to 1992 or 93, I think it was. So I think that's quite a neat little feature, really. So while we're still on this car here, we'll turn this one back over and we'll release these two screws, which will then release the chassis from the body. And then we can actually have a look inside, and you can see, when I mean there's a lot going on, there's quite a bit inside of this tiny little chassis. And as you can see, when I say tiny, that's quite slender. So when I open this up, which is held on by two little catches at the back. So when you put it back on, you just have to remember that bit. So you can see inside here, I'll take these front wheels away. So you've got all the wires going back to the turbo flash at the back here. You've got the rear pinion and the rear gear, which is very neatly packed in there. And the wires run around the sides. And then to this, I believe, like a form of control module, which gives like a feedback power. So once you release, it releases a feedback power to light this up briefly, to give you that illusion of a turbo flash, as they call it. So this one, different to these two, has the connections up here, which was, you could say, an upgrade to what there was. So it was easier to replace this guide if needed. So we'll put that back, find the catches at the back here, and clip that back in place. When placing the front axle back in place, the suspension arms have a little guide on the side of the plastic. So it's just making sure that it slots back into there. And then once again, with the cockpit, you've got a notch just at the back, sorry. You slot that into place. And just like that, it's closed up. So a very neat little feature. And that's all back together. So we'll have a look at the first gen, and we'll open this up. Once again, we'll remove the cockpit. Which allows us access to those pickups. But this is where it's different. You haven't got the opening like you have on the Hornbys, because we're running the old guide with the pins that push into to hold these brushes in or braids in place. So that's the, you could say, like the upgrade when Hornby started printing their name on the base and changed the magnet. But still very neat that we can still access the motor points, you know, if we had to resolder those or check the resistor or any other inspections that are needed. And also with this one, you've got the open port at the back, so we can actually see what's going on with the gear and the pinion. But I'll open this up. So remove the front wheels, put those to one side. And as you can see, we've got no rear flash, so no need for the control module, you could call it. It's probably not what it's called, but I can't think of what it might be called. So a little less going on inside here. So when they put the turbo flash in, it obviously was like a scratch your head moment, how we're going to put this all in there, and they managed to squeeze it in, which was brilliant. But very sort of simple internally there. Pretty much as we know the vintage Scalextrics to look like inside, with the standard guide and braids. So yeah, really not a lot else to see inside there really. These are all fairly clean. I've already cleaned them and restored them previously. So we'll just put this one back together. Once again, you find the guides at the back. Be a little bit more careful with the first gen because this part of the chassis is actually quite weak. So when placing it in, is find that location snug instead of forcing it in, because you'll probably snap these two areas off. And then just making sure to remember to put the front wheels back in place. And once again, is putting these the right way around, finding the slots for the suspension arms. Okay, that's back into position. Just ensure those wires are inside and they don't get pinched. Perfect. We'll reinstate the screws. So I think what we should do now really is open up this much more modern Williams Honda, have a little look inside, see the differences that they've made, especially in the chassis construction. So obviously, you know, the motors and everything in this are all completely different. And these magnets, these are very powerful, you can see. And that must aid with the performance greatly. So we'll open this up, have a little look inside and see what's going on. I can actually feel the magnet pulling the screwdriver. So this just pulls apart, and as I mentioned, it comes away in two pieces, so it's like a two-part chassis, you could call it, and all the front stays together. You can see back here. So once again, very, very smart, very compact. You could probably remove all this rear gearing by loosening this screw off back here. But it's actually a very smart, simple design. And it's just simply the reverse, pulling this back. So place the front screw in first, just to hold that all in place. Actually, what I might do is place the screw onto the screwdriver, because that magnet will continue to pull the screw away. So that's that all back together. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it of some use. I'm hoping I haven't got the history too wrong with these cars. They are very enjoyable to use. I haven't actually used the new one yet, so I'll be interested to see how that one goes around the track. Where these go around the track very well, even this first gen without the magnet makes it a bit more tricky on the bends. But with decent tyres, it actually goes around quite well. I really do enjoy these cars. They've got a bit of a sort of nostalgia, you could say, about them. They're definitely iconic Formula 1 cars. and one that I do enjoy in my collection. I enjoy even just looking at them, including using them. And as I've mentioned before, my daughter, she enjoys running these around our little track. So hopefully we will still enjoy them for years to come. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.